It all started on a Thursday afternoon when Sarah came home wearing yoga pants and an unfamiliar look in her eyes. She threw her keys on the kitchen counter and casually said, "I signed up for Zumba." I blinked, thinking she was joking. Sarah, the woman who once called yoga sweaty torture and refused to walk to the corner store if it was too humid, had voluntarily signed up to move her body for fun. "Just to sweat a little," she added with a shrug, as if that explained everything. She opened the fridge, grabbed a sparkling water, and started Googling best workout headbands for cardio. I stood there, frozen in place, watching her hum along to a pop song as if we hadn't been arguing about grocery bills just 3 days earlier. It was jarring. I couldn't help but wonder where this sudden burst of fitness enthusiasm had come from. For the past 5 years, Sarah had been staunchly anti-gym. Her idea of cardio was chasing our dog around the living room. She claimed she hated the smell of gyms, the fluorescent lights, and the judgy looks from gym moms. So what changed? And why Zumba? "Group classes are fun," she said that evening over dinner. "They're full of energy and music, and no one takes themselves too seriously." I smiled, but part of me didn't buy it. Something about the way she said it felt rehearsed. Still, I let it go. Everyone deserves to reinvent themselves now and then. The first class was the following Monday. She left the house in neon leggings and a fitted tank top I'd never seen before. I asked if it was new. She nodded, grabbing her car keys and saying she'd be back by 8. When she returned, she was out of breath, hair-soaked, and flushed red from the cheeks down to her collarbone. She smelled like some unfamiliar perfume, fruity, sweet, but not one I recognized. "Wow," I said, "looks like you got a good workout." She laughed and wiped sweat from her forehead. It was intense, the instructors like a drill sergeant with hips. I chuckled and didn't push. It's not every day your wife comes home drenched and giddy from shaking her body to reggaeton. But the classes kept happening, every Monday, Wednesday, and sometimes Saturday. She started packing a gym bag the night before. She bought new sneakers. She downloaded an app to track her heart rate. Then came the new sports bras, matching leggings, and a $90 water bottle. She said it helped her stay hydrated like a pro. I didn't question it at first. We were both in our 30s, and a little health kick seemed harmless, healthy even. But it wasn't long before the late nights started. One day she got home at 9:30. "Traffic," she said, waving off my concern. "Stopped to grab a smoothie." She didn't have a smoothie in her hand. I noticed her phone had dozens of unread messages, unusual for her. She also stopped bringing her gym bag inside right away. Sometimes she left it in the trunk for hours. Then there was the night she came home drenched, like really soaked. Her hair clung to her neck, and her shirt was sticking to her back like she'd jumped in a pool. "Zumba was wild tonight," she said, brushing past me into the bathroom. "The air conditioner broke." I remember standing there, watching water drip from her elbow onto the tile. It didn't look like sweat, it looked like someone had hosed her down. The next day, I asked what gym she went to. "Fusion Fitness," she replied without hesitation. I Googled it. It had great reviews, a decent parking lot, and a class schedule posted online. But when I looked for the Zumba class times, something felt off. The schedule said Mondays and Fridays, not Wednesdays or Saturdays. I waited a few days before asking again. She said the schedule changed all the time, and you can't trust what's online. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But then I found the receipt. It was in the laundry basket, folded into a pair of leggings. A receipt from a juice bar 20 miles across town, dated and time-stamped right during her so-called Zumba class. That night, I didn't say a word. I lay next to her in bed, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly overhead. My thoughts were louder than the hum of the blades. What if she wasn't going to Zumba? What if this was the cliché unraveling of a marriage, sweatpants to secrets? I remembered how her phone had a new passcode. She claimed it was because of work email. She never used to care about privacy. Now she flinched when I reached for her phone to check the weather. I told myself I was being paranoid. People are allowed to change, to grow. But growth shouldn't look like vanishing. It shouldn't come with shadows. The next morning, she was cheerful again. She danced around the kitchen, playing Bad Bunny on full volume. She made a smoothie with kale, banana, and chia seeds. Then she kissed me on the cheek and said, "Gotta burn it off tonight." That evening, she left again in her neon gear. This time, I followed her. I know how that sounds. Like the desperate act of a suspicious husband. But it wasn't desperation. It was self-preservation. I waited 10 minutes, then got in my car and followed from a distance. She took the freeway, farther than I expected. She didn't go to Fusion Fitness. She didn't go to any gym at all. She pulled into a strip mall parking lot and walked into a building labeled Lotus Wellness Spa. My stomach turned. I waited engine off, palms sweaty. Time moved like molasses. She came out an hour later, hair damp, face glowing, wearing a new top. She didn't look tired, she looked radiant. She didn't go home. She drove 2 blocks over and entered a tiny cafe I didn't recognize. I didn't follow her in. I couldn't. Instead, I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, wondering how many more secrets I didn't know. Wondering when Zumba had stopped being Zumba. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of Sarah's breathing next to me. It was steady, peaceful, like she hadn't just spent the evening lying to me. Like she hadn't gone to a spa instead of Zumba, then wandered into a mystery cafe without a word. I replayed the drive in my head 100 times. The way she smiled before leaving, the bounce in her step, the false innocence in her voice. What else was she hiding? Was there someone else? The idea clawed at my brain. I didn't want to believe it, but the signs were there. I started paying attention to everything. The way she guarded her phone like it was a vault. The new texts she seemed to get at odd hours, buzz, tap, quick glance, silence. No names ever popped up, only blank notifications or work group chat. Sarah hadn't worked a traditional job in 6 months. She freelanced as a copy editor, mostly at home, mostly alone. So who was texting her at 9:43 p.m. with fire emojis and laughing faces? I checked our shared calendar. Zumba was always listed. But the classes never aligned with Fusion Fitness's public schedule. They were always just off enough to make me question my sanity. I tried calling the gym one afternoon just to inquire about memberships. The girl who answered was cheerful, bubbly, exactly what I expected from a Zumba receptionist. I asked if I could join my wife's class. She said, "We haven't had Zumba on Wednesdays for a while now." I paused, my heart thudding. "You're sure?" I asked, pretending to sound casual. "Definitely. Our Wednesday evening classes are kickboxing and spin." I thanked her and hung up. I sat at my desk, fingers trembling. The evidence was mounting, and it was undeniable. She wasn't going to Zumba. Not even close. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I cooked dinner like usual, pasta, salad, garlic bread. She came home later than usual, her hair damp and curling slightly at the ends. Her clothes were clinging to her like she'd been caught in a storm. "Class was insane," she laughed, tossing her bag onto the floor. "Swear I lost 5 pounds in sweat." I nodded, forcing a smile. Inside, my mind was a war zone. We ate together like we had for years. But every bite felt like betrayal. She asked me how my day was. I told her I had a slow one, just errands and emails. That wasn't a lie. But it wasn't the truth either. I'd spent an hour in the parking lot outside Lotus Wellness Spa, watching people go in and out. The sign on the window read, "Massage Meditation Healing Rooms." What kind of Zumba class ended with lavender candles and silence? I didn't know, and I didn't like the answers forming in my head. That weekend, I did something I'm not proud of. I snooped. While she was in the shower, I checked her phone. I knew the passcode, her birth year reversed. I didn't scroll far. Just far enough to find the messages. There weren't many, but they were there. A name saved as Jenna F. But the messages weren't from a woman. The tone, the phrasing, they screamed male energy. Can't wait to see you Monday. You were incredible today. Still thinking about last night. No emojis. No photos. Just enough to shatter me. Just enough to confirm my worst fear. I closed the app and put her phone back exactly as it was. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped it. That night, I couldn't look at her the same. She kissed my cheek before bed, and I nearly flinched. My stomach turned at the thought of her with someone else. Of her sharing pieces of herself that used to belong to me. I told myself I needed proof. Real proof, something undeniable. So I made a plan. The next time she left for Zumba, I'd follow again, but this time I'd go inside. I called Lotus Wellness and made an appointment. Just a drop-in class, I said. They booked me for a tour and trial session. Wednesday, 6:00 p.m. The same time she'd be there. I arrived early, parked across the street and waited. Sure enough, at 5:55, her car pulled in. She got out in leggings and a hoodie, hair tied high, confidence in every step. She walked in smiling. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't hiding like someone having an affair. She looked content. That confused me more than anything. 5 minutes later, I entered. The lobby smelled like eucalyptus and citrus oil. A receptionist greeted me, handed me a waiver, and offered a cucumber water. "Is this your first time?" "Yes," I said, trying to sound casual. "I heard there's a new Zumba class here." She laughed. "Not exactly. We do aqua cardio in the back pool, private members only." Aqua cardio? Water? Suddenly it clicked. The soaked clothes, the damp hair, the extra towels in the trunk. "Do you know Sarah?" I asked. "Dark hair, glasses, usually comes Wednesday nights." The receptionist nodded. "Oh, Sarah, she's lovely, never misses a session, quiet but consistent." I smiled weakly. So she had been working out, just not in the way I'd expected. My mind flipped. Had I built all of this suspicion out of pride? Later, I saw her through the window near the pool deck. She was in a navy one-piece, hair slicked back, laughing with a small group of women. No men. No Jenna F. Only women. Exhausted, heavy-bodied, real women trying to heal, trying to move, trying to feel strong again. Something inside me cracked open. A mix of shame and relief flooded through me. I drove home alone that night. I didn't stay for the class. I needed time to process. Time to understand the man I was becoming. Was I insecure? Was I broken? Or had I simply forgotten how to trust the woman I once vowed to never doubt? Either way, the damage had begun to form long before Zumba ever entered our lives. And I had to face it. All of it. The next morning, I woke up before Sarah, lying in bed with my eyes fixed on the ceiling as the weight of what I'd seen pressed down on me. It wasn't betrayal that consumed me, it was guilt. Guilt for letting suspicion infect the quiet spaces of our marriage. Guilt for the way I'd let silence become a weapon between us. She stirred beside me, groaned softly, then pulled the blanket over her shoulder. Her breathing was soft, innocent, unaware of the storm inside me. I watched her for a moment, wondering how much I really knew her anymore. Or if I'd ever truly known her at all. She looked peaceful, but my peace was gone. By the time she woke up, I'd already made coffee and was sitting at the table, scrolling through nothing on my phone. When she walked in, her hair was messy and her voice was light. "Morning," she said with a yawn. "Morning," I replied without looking up. She poured her coffee and leaned against the counter. Something in her posture seemed relaxed, too relaxed. "I was thinking of signing up for an extra class this weekend," she said. I nodded. "You really like it, huh?" I asked, finally looking at her. Her eyes flicked toward mine and then away. "It's been good for me," she said. "Really good." I set my phone down slowly. She sipped her coffee, then asked, "Something wrong?" I almost said no. Almost swallowed it all. But I couldn't. Not anymore. I followed you, I said. The words landed like a brick between us. She didn't move. She just stared. I went to the wellness place, I continued. I saw you through the glass. She placed her mug down, gently, like anything louder might cause the moment to crack. Why, she asked. The question felt like a challenge and a cry all at once. I opened my mouth, but the words tangled in my throat. Because you lied, I finally said. About where you were, what you were doing. She crossed her arms, defensive. I didn't lie, I just didn't explain. That's not how marriage works, I snapped. She looked down. I softened my voice. I thought you were cheating, Sarah. She looked up sharply, face stunned. Cheating? You were distant, you were gone for hours. You came home wet, your phone was locked, there were messages. I stopped myself. What messages? She asked. My throat went dry. From someone saved as Jenna F., I admitted. She blinked, then burst out laughing. Jesus, Mark, she said. That's Jessica, my therapist. I froze. Your therapist? She told me to use a fake name in case anyone went through my phone. Confidentiality and all that. I felt heat rush to my face. I wasn't meeting anyone, she said, voice rising. I was taking classes, water cardio. I was trying to feel like myself again. The silence between us swelled with shame. I stared at her, watching the fury and pain collide in her eyes. I've been drowning in my own skin for 2 years, she said. After the miscarriage, after everything, we never talked about it. I looked away. It was true. We buried it, both of us. We covered grief in chores and calendars and fake smiles. I didn't want you to see me like that, she whispered. I didn't want to ask for help and get pity. I wouldn't have pitied you, I said quietly. You would have tried to fix me. She wasn't wrong. Fixing is what I do. I needed to fix myself, she continued. To feel strong in my own body, to sweat for myself, not for anyone else. And the secrecy, I asked. She wiped a tear from her cheek. I was afraid, she said. Afraid if I showed you the version of me that hated what I saw in the mirror, you'd pull away. But I did anyway, I whispered. She nodded, her lips trembling. I didn't cheat, she said again, firmer this time. I committed the sin of wanting to rediscover myself. I walked to her slowly. She tensed at first, but I reached for her hand. I'm sorry, I said. I'm so sorry. She let out a shaky breath. I am too. We stood there in silence. Two people who had once been whole, trying to piece themselves together again. After a while I asked, can I come with you next time? She looked at me surprised. You want to take Aqua Zumba? She asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. I shrugged, maybe not the full routine, but I want to be part of this with you. She gave a small smile. Okay, she said, yeah, I'd like that. Later that evening, she showed me a video on her phone. A blurry recording of her in the pool, laughing, dancing awkwardly to Latin beats. She looked alive. More alive than I'd seen her in years. I don't recognize that woman, I said. She looks happy. She is, Sarah replied. She's just been scared to let you see her. Well, I said, turning toward her, I'm ready to meet her. Her eyes softened. She leaned into me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I held my wife without tension. Without questions. Just presence. Just breath. That night we didn't talk much. But we didn't need to. There are some wounds words can't stitch. Only showing up can. And maybe, just maybe, it was time I stopped fearing the wet clothes, the late returns, the quiet phone. Because the only thing that was truly drowning was the space between us. And I was ready to swim back to her. The next few days felt like walking through a house I no longer recognized, where every wall was familiar but the air had shifted. Sarah and I spoke more than we had in months, but the conversations were cautious, like stepping over glass. She was still going to her aqua classes, now without secrecy, and she always offered for me to come along. I hadn't said yes yet, not because I didn't want to, but because I needed to understand who I'd become first. I needed to sit with my own mistakes, to confront the bitter taste of what I had assumed, accused, imagined. Each morning, she'd leave with a gym bag and kiss my cheek. And every morning, that kiss felt more honest, less performative. But trust isn't a faucet you turn back on. It's a slow drip after a long drought. One night, she came home earlier than usual. She looked different, not just in her body, but in her presence. Her shoulders didn't slouch. Her eyes didn't dart. She placed her gym bag on the floor and said, "I want to show you something." I paused, unsure, but nodded. She took out a stack of printed pages, carefully stapled, worn at the edges. It was a group journal from her wellness program. There were entries from women, anonymous but vivid. One woman wrote about body shame after divorce, another about trauma after childbirth. And then there was Sarah's. I recognized her handwriting immediately. She'd written about our miscarriage 2 years ago, about the silence that followed it, about how she felt like her body had failed, like she no longer deserved to feel desirable, let alone powerful. "I didn't know how to say any of this to you," she whispered. So I wrote it down. I read each line, my throat tightening with every word. She wrote about feeling invisible, about wanting to disappear. She wrote about how each drop of sweat in that pool was an act of defiance. Against the version of herself she hated, against the fear that she wasn't enough. "I joined the class to sweat a little," she said quietly. "But I stayed because every time I got wet, I felt a little more alive." It hit me then, harder than all the doubts I'd carried. She wasn't hiding from me, she was hiding from herself. And she wasn't just wet from exertion. She was baptized in self-forgiveness. I reached across the table and held her hand. It was cool and damp from the shower, but it felt like fire in mine. "You could have told me," I said softly. "I know," she replied, not defensively, just honestly. "I didn't think you'd understand." She looked away. "I didn't want to risk your pity." I shook my head. "I don't pity you, I admire you." That startled her. She blinked at me, as if seeing me for the first time in a long time. "Why?" she asked. "Because while I was spiraling in suspicion, you were climbing out of a hole I didn't even know you were in." She nodded, wiping a tear. It wasn't just about exercise, it was about reclaiming my body. She stood and lifted her shirt slightly, pointing to the stretch marks just above her waistline. "I used to hate these," she said. "Now I trace them before bed. They're proof I lived, proof I survived." Her voice cracked, and so did my chest. I walked to her slowly. I wrapped my arms around her, not to fix her, but to hold her steady. We didn't speak for a long time. Just held each other like two people who had finally stopped running. When we let go, she smiled. A real, unscripted, unguarded smile. "I've been thinking," she said. "Maybe it's time I teach you how to float." "Float?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "In the water, you're always sinking into worry. It's time you learned how to let go." I laughed. It wasn't bitter this time. "That's fair," I said. "I've always been more of a sinker." The next day I bought swim trunks. I hadn't stepped in a pool in years. That Saturday, I joined her for the first time. I was nervous, insecure, and absolutely convinced I'd look ridiculous. But she greeted me in the shallow end, like I was her favorite student. The other women were kind, some waved, some nodded. There was no judgment. Only music, movement, and water. The instructor was charismatic, energetic, and genuinely encouraging. Sarah stayed by my side, guiding me through every rhythm. At one point I slipped and almost fell. She laughed and caught me. "That's the whole point," she said. "You fall, you rise, you splash." By the end of the class, I was soaked. Not just with water, but with something purer, relief. We drove home with the windows down. The sun was setting, and her hand was resting on mine. "Thank you for trusting me," she said. "Thank you for letting me relearn how," I replied. That night, I hung her group journal beside our wedding photo. Not as a monument of pain, but as a badge of survival. Marriage is not just vows and vacations. It's confession, confession again, and acceptance without armor. And in the damp echo of locker rooms and chlorine, I learned something I never expected. That the woman I married wasn't gone. She was simply underwater, waiting to breathe. And when she rose, soaked and strong, she brought me with her. Not because I deserved it, but because she chose to. Regret doesn't always come in a single moment. It creeps in slowly, like water seeping under a closed door. At first, you don't notice it, but one day, you look down and realize everything is soaked. After that Saturday class, I started seeing Sarah with new eyes. Not as my wife who vanished into the steam of her secrets, but as a woman I had failed to listen to. I thought I knew everything about her. Turns out, I only knew the version she performed for me. The version who smiled when she was tired, who laughed when she wanted to scream. The version who used sarcasm as armor and silence as a shield. And I was so busy protecting my pride, I never noticed how long she'd been drowning. Or that she was learning how to breathe without me. That realization hit me like a punch in the chest. Because for all my anger, I never once asked how she was really doing. Not after the miscarriage. Not when she stopped going out with friends. Not when she stopped wearing makeup or singing in the car. Not when she started sleeping in her robe. I thought she was fine. I thought we were just tired, just aging. But she was unraveling in front of me. And I was too wrapped in my own resentment to care. I remembered a night 6 months ago when she stood in the kitchen with the fridge door open. She stared at the shelves for 5 minutes before closing it without taking anything. I had asked, not hungry. She said, I don't even know what I want. I took it literally. I didn't realize she was talking about more than food. That memory burned in my brain now. Because regret is cruel, it sharpens all the moments you ignored. One morning, she was in the bathroom doing her hair, and I stood in the doorway just watching her. She caught my reflection in the mirror. What? She asked, half laughing. Nothing, I said. You look different lately. Different how? Stronger. She paused, curling iron in hand. I don't feel stronger. I feel softer, like I stopped fighting myself. I walked in and leaned against the wall. I'm sorry I didn't see what you were going through. She blinked. It's okay. No, I said, shaking my head. It's not. She sat on the edge of the tub, hair falling over one shoulder. You were hurting too, you just didn't talk about it either. I sat beside her. We stared at the tile floor like it held answers. I was angry at you for leaving me out, I admitted. But the truth is, I left first. I left when I stopped asking how you felt. Her hand found mine. It was easier to pretend everything was fine. And safer, I added. She nodded. We sat in that bathroom for a long time, letting the silence do the talking. It wasn't dramatic or teary. It was just real. Just long overdue. Later that evening, I was in the garage looking for an old space heater. I found a plastic tub labeled Junk Drawer 2019. Inside were birthday cards, broken headphones, expired coupons, and a journal. Not the wellness one, this one was hers. I hesitated. Then I opened it. The first entry was dated the day after we lost the baby. Her handwriting was shaky. She wrote about bleeding in the car and how I held her hand but didn't look her in the eye. She wrote about how quiet the house felt afterward, like it was ashamed. She wrote, Mark hasn't cried. Does that mean I'm weak for crying so much? I stopped reading. I couldn't breathe. I sat on the concrete floor and cried like I hadn't in years. Tears fell onto her words, smudging the ink. It felt like vandalizing something sacred. But maybe it was also absolution. Because in those pages, I found the version of Sarah I never bothered to ask about. The one who mourned alone. The one who rebuilt herself without applause. I closed the journal and placed it gently back in the box. Then I went inside and hugged her without saying a word. She didn't ask why. She just held me back. We didn't need to explain anymore. We just needed to stay. That night we lay in bed, and for the first time in a long time we talked about the baby. Not like a thing that broke us, but like a soul that visited and left too soon. We cried together, held each other, and I realized that forgiveness doesn't always need an apology. Sometimes it needs vulnerability. Sometimes it needs two people sitting in their scars and choosing not to hide. That's what we did. And it was enough. More than enough. The rage I'd been carrying for months slipped off my shoulders like a heavy coat. What replaced it was quieter, gentler. Not relief exactly, but redemption. It was a Sunday morning when Sarah asked me to come to her class again. The sky was overcast, and the air felt like the pause between seasons, between what had passed and what was still possible. I hesitated, my hand wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee, eyes staring out the kitchen window. She stood beside the table, not pressuring me, not coaxing, just waiting. This time, the invitation didn't feel like an olive branch. It felt like a bridge we'd started building together, and she was asking me to take one more step across it. I looked up at her and said, "Yeah, I think I'd like to." And that was it. We drove in quiet, but it wasn't the silence of discomfort. It was the kind of quiet where hearts breathe side by side. I watched her adjust her wristband, tuck her hair behind her ear, glance at me and smile. There was something new in her smile now, less cautious, more grounded. When we arrived, I recognized a few of the women from before. They greeted Sarah with nods and waves, like she belonged. She did. She had earned that space. She handed me a towel and whispered, "Just have fun. No one here's trying to be impressive." I nodded, swallowing a lump in my throat. The water was cooler than I expected. But strangely it felt cleansing. We began the warm-up. The music pulsed softly through the overhead speakers, familiar but distant. The instructor welcomed everyone, then gave me a playful side-eye. "New face, don't worry, we go easy on the first-timers." Everyone chuckled, and I did too. For the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider in Sarah's world. She moved through the water with confidence, her arms slicing the surface with rhythm and grace. I fumbled through the routines, but she never laughed. She only smiled, whispered, "You're doing great," and kept me going. The air was thick with moisture, the walls echoed with splashes and breath. I caught glimpses of myself in the window reflections, awkward, dripping, but somehow free. And beside me, the woman I almost lost, dancing without apology. Halfway through, the instructor called for a pause. We gathered along the edge of the pool, catching our breath. Sarah turned to me, resting her elbows on the ledge. Her eyes were calm, clear. "This saved me," she said. "I know," I replied. "No, I mean really, I was disappearing before this." I didn't speak, I let her finish. I needed a place where I didn't have to pretend, where no one expected me to bounce back, to be strong, to smile when I felt like sinking. And I let you think I was fine. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how. I reached for her hand beneath the water. "I wish I'd asked sooner." She nodded, eyes glistening. "I was angry at you for not seeing me. And I was angry at myself for not letting you see." We sat like that, knees brushing, palms pressed together beneath the ripples. The others had begun their cool-down stretches, but we stayed still. "Do you forgive me?" I asked. "For hiding?" She didn't answer immediately. She looked at me like she was reading every word I wasn't saying. "I forgive us both," she finally said. "For surviving in silence." I let out a shaky breath. Then she added, "But I want something different now." "Anything?" I said. She smiled. "Promise me we'll stop assuming, stop pretending, just ask." "I promise. Even when it's awkward. Especially when it's awkward." We laughed, and it echoed off the tile walls like music. Then she said, "And promise me this isn't the last time you come." "I'll come every week if you let me." "You're gonna regret that," she teased. After class, we stood poolside, wrapping towels around our shivering bodies. The sky had cleared, sunlight pouring through the high windows. The instructor walked by and said, "You two make a good pair." Sarah looked at me, eyebrows raised. I suppose we do, I replied. And for once, I believed it not because I had to, but because it felt undeniably true. Back at home, I placed the damp towels in the laundry and found Sarah in the living room. She was standing in front of our bookshelf, staring at an old photo of us. The one from our honeymoon. We were tan, sunburned, smiling, and totally oblivious to the life ahead. Do you think they'd recognize us? She asked. I stood beside her. Maybe not right away, I said. But I think they'd be proud. Even with all the messy parts. Especially because of the messy parts. She leaned into my chest, and I kissed the top of her head. The scent of chlorine and lavender still lingered in her hair. You know, she murmured, when I said I wanted to sweat a little, I didn't expect to cry this much. I chuckled, and I didn't expect to almost drown in my own ego. But here we are. Still wet, I added. She pulled back just enough to look up at me. Still married. Still choosing each other, I said. And still learning how to swim. That night we didn't watch TV. We didn't scroll or text or fill the space with noise. We sat on the floor, legs tangled like teenagers, sharing popcorn and memories. We talked about what scared us, what we missed, what we hoped for. And before bed, she pulled the covers over both of us and whispered, "Don't let me disappear again." I kissed her shoulder and replied, "I'll be in the water with you next time." And I meant it. Because love isn't about preventing storms. It's about showing up in the rain. Soaked cold, honest. And choosing over and over to stay.